Welcome to today's discussion about street epistemology. Today I am interviewing really my favorite sport debater, or maybe I should say competitive debater living. Yeah, sorry, you do come second to Christopher Hitchens in my eyes, but that's a good race to be in. Tom Jump, welcome.
Thanks for having me on.
Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I run a YouTube channel called T-Jump, where I usually debate professors and philosophers from around the world. I have been doing this for about 2 years now, full time for about a year. I think my Patreon anniversary gave me a notification. It was exactly 1 year, a few days ago, actually. Yeah, it's my hobby, I guess. Definitely, I'm familiar with SEs. Talked with a few of the big heavy hitters from SE, Reed and Anthony and Pine Creek. The Doug. So yeah, that's the most important thing to know about me. That's my YouTube stuff.
Okay. So I wanted to ask, regards sport debate, I think you're awesome in this, and you go up against all sorts of these crazy people. There's about 3 or 4 of the people that you regularly communicate with that drive me completely out of my mind, and I can't stand to listen to them unless you give me a really good reason. So I've only watched the end of one of those. I'm not going to name who they are. There's a particular subset that I think that your viewers might already recognize, and the rest could just learn. It's fun. And so I don't watch any of those. How do you keep your temper? How do you calm yourself when being yelled at by the likes of a few particular outliers?
Well, it never really bothered me because I see it more as a form of entertainment. Like, I'm there to get views for the most part. So they're the show, and I'm just there to react. Kind of like the reaction videos on YouTube, where you just kind of just show your face and you see something funny, and then you show a reaction, and then that's essentially the content. And so debates with Godless Girl and Darth Dawkins, cough. They're mostly just reaction videos. And so it doesn't bother me at all that they're yelling at me. It's kind of the point. So I go into them expecting that.
Okay. You go in expecting that. Well, so I think I've lost Tom, so I'm going to reset. Just a moment.
Can you guys still hear me? See me?
Yes. And I've reset. Okay. Am I restored? Okay. Okay. Very good. So which is my next question? Do you have a minimum goal when you go into a debate? Do you have a particular thing in mind, and how often do you fail to achieve that?
Nope, I've never had a specific goal when I go into debates. It's more just about the conversation, just a natural conversation. That's about it. So pretty much always achieve that goal. It's not really too hard. I don't have any expectations of whether or not it's going to be a good or a yelly conversation. Either is kind of fine with me. It's just whichever way it goes, as long as it entertains the audience for the most part.
So how do you approach sport debate without having in mind a win or lose condition? That seems.
Because for me, the win or lose condition is more about whether or not the audience enjoys it, not about whether or not my opponent believes something or accepts something that I don't,
right,
or do or don't. So in most cases, I don't have any kind of a specific topic that's relevant. There's a few examples where I did have a specific thing I wanted to bring up, like in my conversation with Robin Collins, who's like the world's leading expert in the fine and tuning argument. I specifically wanted to ask him if there is everything in physics, nothing in physics actually indicates design. Design is only indicated by the physics plus some additional philosophical argument that isn't in the physics. That question I did specifically want to bring up, and so that was my goal of that conversation. I did, and I got the answer I was hoping for too. So,
okay, what was the answer that you got from Robin Collins?
Yeah, he agreed. So there's nothing in physics that indicates design. It's only the physics plus the philosophical argument for the morality of God that gets you to design.
Okay. If you could debate with anyone in the alive category and anyone in the dead category, so these are two questions, two columns. Which would you pick in each column?
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump in the
Uh,
alive column.
yep. Dead column. I don't know. See, I have not taken much time to actually think about that. So
That's quite okay. That's quite okay. So why
maybe
would you be so interested to debate Donald Trump?
for the views, always for the views. Orange man bad.
Okay. He would just be an excellent draw to have a conversation with. I can see that. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So how was that
What's the
time in
next?
Russia on that bed? That happened, right?
You naughty, you naughty. Without pushing into your privacy, can you tell me how your intimates see your hobby, or maybe it's a profession now?
Yeah. This is my full-time job as a YouTuber. It's the only thing I do other than like donating plasma, which does pay. I do it because it burns calories. So yeah, YouTube is my
Okay.
full-time job now. It's better than McDonald's. I prefer it to working at McDonald's, even though I've never
Good.
worked at
Good. Good.
McDonald's.
Okay.
Um,
So your confidence on that sort of like you're just working off a couple of somebody else's not data point. Other people's stories.
yeah. Jobs usually are not fun.
Mm,
That is the consensus among the experts. Like people don't really enjoy work for the most part. So YouTube is significantly preferable because I only have to work a few
hmm.
hours a month. That's great.
Okay. Have you experienced a debate opponent significantly changing their mind during a debate?
I don't know. I mean, I've definitely had debate opponents who been presented with an argument or evidence like, oh, I've never considered that, or I don't know how to process that. I'm gonna have to really take some time to think about that. And that's essentially the best you could hope for. I think, and there have definitely been times where someone had an academic point where they said, I believe most academics believe this. And I'm like, no, they actually believe this. Here's the source, and I can give it to you. And they're like, oh, I guess I was wrong
Hmm.
about that. Those kinds of just factual claims I've had people change their minds on. But I
Okay.
don't know if I've like actually converted someone to atheism during a debate when I've
Mm.
like had a conversation with them.
It doesn't seem like most of your conversations are about atheism. I mean, I guess there's that series. Is there a good reason to believe in a god? I guess that's atheism. The rest of it's like
Yeah.
morality, this or ontology, that. Okay. Have you ever changed your mind during a debate?
Yeah, in my debate with Randall Rouser, he brought up fallibilism for the first time, and before he brought that up, I never heard about that position before. And it's the position that you can have knowledge without absolute certainty, and that he brought up the fact that that was a expert position in,
Hmm.
or the consensus position in philosophy, and I had never known that. And so when
Oh,
from him bringing it up, I adopted that position, and learned about that position from him.
interesting. I don't remember whether I learned that from you. I don't think I did. I think I learned that prior. In any case, I agree. Certainty is not necessary and
Grading.
probably impossible.
Yeah.
Do you fear that you might get fooled into believing something daft or learning some inconvenient truth?
Not really, no. I think because I have my epistemology that I wrote in establishing what is reasonable to believe, I believe that it's good enough that even though I could definitely end up believing things that are false, those false beliefs would be justified because they'd have to have some kind of an evidence behind them. And so even if I could be convinced of false beliefs, there'd have to be sufficient justification for them.
Okay. And given sufficient justification, you wouldn't fear changing your mind. You'd want to change your mind in that case, then, even if it were
Yeah,
inconvenient.
definitely. So it's kind of like just the scientific position of I believe what the evidence seems to indicate, even though it's probably wrong. Like there's this quote from statistics: "All models are wrong, but all models are useful. As long as it's useful,
Mm.
then it's good enough to believe. It's justified to believe, even though it's probably wrong, and it can just be replaced by something that's more useful in the future."
Hmm. Hmm. If we understand that a model is approximate, I think I have very little trouble having a false model. Newtonian mechanics is perfectly good enough for me, even though I know general relativity is required for GPS. But heck, I'm only doing Kerbal. What do I care? It's only sloppy. Have you ever rage quit an interview or a debate?
Um, I don't know. Maybe. I mean, there's definitely been some times where I was like close, but I don't think so. Not that I can remember off the top of my head, except for things like on Twitter or Facebook where I'm just there to troll anyway. So it's not really a formal
Okay.
anything.
Yeah, it wouldn't those kind of things you don't have to do. Okay. Have you ever damaged any relationships because of a debate?
Uh, I, mm, I don't know. Like maybe with certain people like Kyle Hewitt or something who we didn't really get along to begin with. But other than
Hmm.
that, not really. Not any in my personal life for the most part.
Okay. Okay. I wouldn't be surprised you might not get along with somebody who you met during a debate. That could. Let's see. Did you get okay? How did you get so damn good at? I hear you don't even enjoy it much. I didn't realize that until somewhat recently. It boggles me how you could motivate yourself toward getting good at something you don't enjoy. Is it because it's a mean to an end, like Trump 2032?
Yes, it is definitely a means to an end, but the end is more relationships with hot blondes, not the presidency. So, but
Okay.
yeah. So I've always hated
Views
conversation.
question mark hot blondes.
Yeah,
Is that the?
pretty much. Yeah.
Oh,
So yeah,
oh,
I've
okay.
always
Okay.
I've
I
always
like
hated
question 21.
conversation.
Okay. You're familiar with Jonathan Haidt, yes? Yeah. I'm sorry, I cut out. I didn't hear you.
Yes, I am definitely familiar with
Yes.
Jonathan Haidt and his work on, I think, the
Okay.
political spectrum. I think is the most
Yeah. Yeah.
interesting.
So I want to list. I don't know if this is going to show up. Oh goodness, that's butchered. So I'm just going to read it to you. It's just all messed up over on the screen. So I'd like you to take the 5 values that he talks about and list them in your favorite. This is about T-Jump 2032. If we know where your values are coming from, we'd like that. So let me see. Maybe we can type that between it. Care for others, do no harm would be 1. Fairness, justice, equality, in-group loyalty, respect for authority, and purity. Of those, maybe you
Definitely.
could tell me your favorite or your least favorites.
Yeah. Care for others, do no harm, fairness, justice, equality. Everything else doesn't matter.
Okay,
It's just the first two.
excellent.
But I
All right.
can respect for authority is garbage. You should never respect authorities. It's all I go with science. Challenge authority every chance you can. Um, the in-group loyalty, don't care at all. I don't care about loyalty. It's irrelevant. All that matters is whether or not we can survive. And what was the last one? It's still cut off on the screen.
It's still cut off. The last one is purity.
Purity, yeah, purity. No, that's completely irrelevant. Doesn't
Okay.
make a difference at all.
Okay. Thank you for that. Now, there's so many things I can predict from that answer. So many of the rest of the things I don't even need to ask questions on, but we're still going to ask questions. Reed mentions that there's actually 6 because fairness was split into liberty and fairness. So liberty and fairness might be separate in this list, and I should probably make the list 6 retroactively. So
Yeah,
make a note
liberty
that
is
I should
also
do
a
that.
really important one. Liberty, I would definitely also put into the categories of the really important ones.
Okay, so care for others and with do no harm, fairness, and liberty. Those are your 3 happy ones. Thank you. Okay, next question. What would you accept as a miracle?
Anything that's a testable prediction. You could say, I believe there is this supernatural being who does miracles, and he's going to knock this cup over in 5 seconds, and then you just count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The cup falls over. That's a good miracle. You just, as long as it can make testable predictions, and you call it a miracle, it counts as evidence of a miracle.
Okay. Somehow in what you're saying, that doesn't exclude me just doing banal predictions in science.
If you can consistently get future
I
testable
pour this
predictions,
in, I pour this together, I get this reaction. Something I could predict. It doesn't seem to fall out of the answer you just gave.
that's right.
How do you
If
how do you
if you
specify that it's supernatural?
Well, it's just based on the hypothesis. So you have a hypothesis there is this supernatural agent, and you can make a
Right.
testable prediction about something we don't know yet. Like you can't predict things we already
Right.
know because then that wouldn't be evidence. And if you can get this
Okay.
right and no one else has been able to make these predictions yet, then that's evidence of your hypothesis because you're the only one who can make
Okay.
the future testable predictions, even if your hypothesis is ridiculous. Like if I predict there is a round square,
Mm-hmm.
like on my pinky toe, and then I can do these scientific experiments that no one's ever predicted before, and I get them right. That's evidence of a round square. It doesn't matter what
Mm-hmm.
the hypothesis is, as long as you can make future testable predictions that no one else has been able to do yet. Whatever your hypothesis is, that's evidence for it.
Mm. So if I can predict that I can see a black hole and see the rings on the far side up over the top or something like that, then no, but I didn't have a theory that involves supernaturally doing it. All I did was twist space. Okay, never mind any of that. Go ahead. Are there subjects you won't debate against?
Nope, not really. Pretty much happy to debate anything. I mean, I can't. It'd be hard. It's hard for me to debate against positions that I accept. So
Oh,
uh, it makes it awkward. But other than
oh,
that, not really.
oh. That's something in SC we have to practice really hard because trying to be as neutral as possible means not being kinder or less kind, depending on whether we agree or not agree. Whether we agree or not, we should almost come up with the same examining
For like a
within
specific example would be
wide creative language.
like a specific example would be a subject I would not probably debate is like, was the Holocaust good? I probably would not try to take that position and try to defend it.
Hmm.
But I'd be happy to debate against that position.
Okay. Okay. So you're happy to debate any topic, and you get to pick which side of the debate you're on because you don't want to. Yeah, I get that. So, uh, what evidence would convince you there is a God? And I like Nears.
Novel testable predictions, like if I died and went to heaven and met God, that would be pretty good evidence. If
Okay.
Jesus came back and
Yeah.
everything in
Yeah.
Revelations was an accurate prediction of history, that would be
Mm-hmm.
good evidence. If we could go back in time and see Jesus rise from the dead, that would be pretty good evidence. Like, there's lots of different
Mm-hmm.
ways that could do it. It's just any novel testable predictions.
Okay. Good. Your thoughts on SE? This is from the audience.
SE is terrible. It's the worst thing ever. God, who are these crazy SE people though? I think SE is
Okay.
a really
Thank you.
interesting. I think SE is a really interesting methodology. It's to take a neutral approach that doesn't attack someone's position, and then to phrase it in neutral ways, like what would lower your confidence, as opposed to saying, well, what would convince you you're wrong. The
Mm-hmm.
way it's phrased is a very interesting and productive way to have a conversation that doesn't involve attacking someone's position. And I think that's a very useful a method for people to learn. And I think it would be a great thing to teach, especially like high school students, as a method of
Mm.
communication to like begin your journey into like debates and having meaningful conversations that don't like devolve into fist fights.
We are in a project of on the Discord right now in course development, preparing to commence to begin to plan to what you said. So we have top people working. Top. Okay. Next question. Can debate be used effectively to convince people towards a position?
Yes, but it kind of depends on what you mean by effectively. So to change someone's mind is very difficult, but debate can change usually single digit percentages of the people who watch. And most methodologies don't even get that much. So debate is extremely effective compared to other methodologies, even though it has a single percentage effectiveness rate. So you can kind of see
Wow.
debate as like certain kinds of a drug where drugs have a very low effectiveness rate, but given enough people that they affect, they can change the resulting impact of the disease on the community of the people
Hmm.
taking the drug. So I think that yes, debate is definitely an effective way to change people's minds. And when you're trying to like change someone's position in general, but I think it's more effective at teaching people who agree with your position how to better represent their position. So debate is
Mm.
most effective at presenting the best arguments for and against a position that can then be used by the people who watch it. And so it's kind of like a training regiment to improve both sides of the debate and how they express their position and how they can defend it. That's what I think debate is most important for.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And do you get stage fright?
Not really. No. Like I've done 3 live debates, I think. My first one was in Wisconsin, an audience of about like 400 people or something. Like I think there was like a tiny bit of stage fright, but not really. Uh, it doesn't really affect me. I think I get more stage fright talking to one-on-one with someone, especially someone who I'm attracted to. Then I get stage fright, but talking in front of an audience, like not really. No.
Oh, okay. So you have date anxiety. I
Yeah.
get it. Maybe that's a good word for it. Have you made any lasting friendships that started in debate?
I guess so. Yeah. I'm a big fan of Eric Hernandez. I think he's hilarious. I don't think he's going to debate me anymore because I crushed him. Disclosure, but yeah, I mean, I'm happy with my friendships with
Wow.
James. I really enjoyed James,
Yeah,
and I
James
debated
is
him
awesome.
a couple times. Stephen Worthy, I'm friends with Stephen Worthy. He was my first person I did a live debate against. Enjoyed my debates with Ben Arbor, who I met him in a live debate. I'm sure that there are probably a lot of other people who I've met and have pretty decent friendships with. Like I'm friends with Randall Rouser from our debates with him. Yeah, I think so.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, I'm remembering Rouser with Pine Creek. That's such just okay. A separate little thing there. Go ahead from the
Yeah,
audience.
I don't think they became friends after that.
Right. There's definitely almost grindy. That was bad. Would you rank your top 3 debaters? Can't include yourself.
Top 3. Can't damn
Outside
it.
yourself.
Um, Probably Sam Harris would probably be the number 1 because I think I like his arguments the best. John Carroll probably second best because he's the most knowledgeable, and William Lane Craig because I like his style and the way he presents himself, kind of like Christopher Hitchens, but with more of a factual basis and less of an emotional connotation to it.
That's an amazing subject neutrality on your favoriteness. I appreciate that. I wish I could be that neutral. Please rank your top 3 favorite. No, I'm reading the wrong line. Sorry, I've already read that one. Why did you choose to be a competitive debater?
Because James did debates instead of conversations, and so I just started doing debates on the channel, and then now I do debates. Yeah, none of the stuff
you
on.
started debating with James, working with James on MDD, Modern Day Debate?
Yeah, because all the stuff I did on my channel was always just conversations. I've never hosted a debate on my channel except for one with Standing for Truth and a guy I know from Texas who's a biologist. So yeah, I've never actually done any debates on my channel. I've only ever done debates on like Modern Day Debate and other people who invited me on the channel.
Wow.
Yeah, James from Modern Day Debate YouTube channel. He's the guy who runs it. The Christian guy.
And yeah, that blows me away. I knew he was a Christian from the first time he debated with you on his channel. The first time I saw your stuff. Actually, I'm not sure if it was the first time I ever saw you. I'm unclear about that. Yeah. Who's James? So, how did you meet James?
We both started a YouTube channel at about the same time, and he was doing debates and looking for people, and I sent him a message saying, "Hey, would I be on your show and do debates?" And so
Wow.
after that, I started to be a regular guest on his show, and I've actually because he
Yeah,
used to live here in Minnesota, so
you're the
I've
go-to in a
met a bunch
whole
of people
range of
that he knows.
subjects. It's amazing. It's like, wow. How many of
It's really
those do you
strange
eat?
because
Just
just to continue with the James story. So after meeting James on YouTube, he actually used to live here in Minnesota, so I've actually met a bunch of people who know him. So I met a photographer who knows him, a person who my workout group who knows him, 3 people from the local church who know him, and I've known these people independently of James, and we just happened to talk about him randomly, and we realized that we all know James. James knows everybody here. It's ridiculous.
Okay, who is your favorite SE YouTuber? If you're not preferring to name favorites, maybe you would talk about styles or most effectiveness.
Oh, definitely. It's definitely juggling lessons and read. No one else can compare. They're the best. Um,
Um,
styles. I don't know. Are there like different styles of SC? Because SC seems to be very similar in the way that it's approached because it's attempting to be so neutral. That
mhm,
neutrality seems to make it very similar from different perspectives. And I think that's one of the benefits of it is that it does have a very generic style when applied in different categories because it's trying to be so neutral. And so
mhm,
I definitely think that Reed and Anthony are really good at it. They're very, very proficient at being neutral. And so I appreciate their skill and ability to have a conversation from a neutral perspective. Reed is
mhm,
especially robotic in the way he can do it. Like he can like shut off all emotions, go pure Spock. And
mm,
that's extremely impressive.
mm. He says, "Lol." What evidence would convince? Now we had this one. We said what evidence would convince you whether there's a God. We already talked about that. And if I wrote a separate question that looked just like that, we'll see.
I can just give another answer. $1 million in my bank account that says
Okay.
from God. That would be great.
Aha. Aha. Okay. So it will only cost $1 million to fool T Jump into turning into a theist. Um, yes. Okay. Yes, I'm apparently speaking off off the mic. We did all the questions? Golly. And it's only been 26 minutes. Hmm. You answer questions a lot faster than the other people I've interviewed. Before, if I have 40 questions, that takes over 2 hours. So, okay. Would you describe yourself as spiritual in any sense? Like maybe in the Sam Harris sense?
Probably not, because I usually use the term spiritual to mean a belief in a kind of thing beyond the natural physical world, and so I wouldn't consider myself spiritual until there was like some kind of demonstrable evidence that could show there to be something beyond the natural physical world.
Okay. I welcome everybody in the room to unmute and attack him with your swords and pitchforks. He's used to that sort of thing. If you don't smack him around a little bit, he won't feel at home. So the gloves are off, and you do not have to shoot your messengers today. Have at Tom, or type your
Hello.
question, and I'll be happy to read it. Yes, go ahead.
Um, hey Tom, what's up? I actually just when I got on, I was trying to remember where I've seen you from, and I saw you for the first time a month and a half ago debating Destiny, I think, which was a really cool debate. Like, because I normally agree with all of Destiny's points except for this one. Um, what are your thoughts on that debate?
Well, it wasn't really much of a debate. It was pretty much just him asking questions, and I answered them, and he's like, "Oh, okay," and then just ask another question. So it was an interesting exploration of the idea of objective morality, but I wouldn't really call it much of a debate. Um, yeah, it's a interesting topic trying to express what objective morality could be without a god, because it's so ingrained in people that to have objective morality, you need this kind of supernatural basis, but really in philosophy, you don't. But it's hard to explain why unless you already have the background knowledge of what it means in philosophy.
Yeah, I think if I'm remembering right, like you you took you took an argument that I don't even really remember hearing in like the moral landscape even, which it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it was something like your main example for an objective morality is the intuition that the freedom to choose things is good or intuitively good.
Yes, that would be like the evidence that we use to come to the hypothesis that there is objective morality. So it wouldn't be necessarily evidence of objective morality. It would just be evidence of whatever morality is, even if it's subjective. Yeah, the evidence I would present would be something like given giving someone the option to eat an apple versus forcing them to eat an apple, it's always going to be more moral to give them the option. And that would apply to anything. And we can generalize that principle to pretty much everything. It's always going to be more moral to give someone the option than to force them to do it without their consent. And so it using that as a basis, we can generalize that and try to come to a principle to describe what objective morality would be. And it has to do with consent.
Okay, I just have one more follow-up question to that, because I was trying to understand that, I guess that idea. Like, so if you have, there's two situations, one where you force someone to eat an apple and one where they choose of their own free will, I guess, to eat an apple. But could it be seen as more moral in some sense to force maybe your child to eat an apple rather than to let them eat like hot Cheetos every day for breakfast?
No, that would only be a justified immoral action. So, for example, the reason you don't want to let your kid eat hot Cheetos every day for breakfast is because there's going to be a greater consequence on their freedom, which is imposed on them by nature, because they're going to get fat and cholesterol, heart disease, diabetes, whatever. But if you could just eliminate the consequence and say they wouldn't get any of those things, then there would be no problem with letting them eat Cheetos for breakfast. And so, really, the only reason it's okay to make them eat the apple instead of the Cheetos is because you're preventing a greater restriction on their freedom and that's going to be imposed on them by nature. So it's not actually moral to stop them or from eating the or to force them to eat the apple. It's only a less immoral thing than to allow them to eat the Cheetos and have their life being destroyed by heart disease.
Got it. Thank you.
Um, I'm hearing text about free will. Where are you on free will?
Yeah, I don't believe there is any free will. I think it's essentially logically impossible. I think that any action you choose to do, you either do it for reasons, in which case it's going to be determined by those reasons, or you do it for no reason, in which case it's by definition random. So if it's determined, then it's not free, and if it's random, it's not free. So there's no way to get out of that dichotomy. It's just P or not P, done for reasons or not done for reasons. So there's no way to actually have free will. It's not even a logical possibility to begin with. Most apologists are usually taking the position that there's free will is this third kind of thing. It's like its own dependent ontology that can exist in the universe, even though they can't explain it. And their basis for it is, well, we kind of feel like it's there. We feel like we have choices over our actions, but there's no real coherent explanation of what it would be or what it would refer to. So I don't believe there is anything that could be free will in the libertarian religious sense. I could kind of agree with something like Dan Dennett's, for what it's called, compatibilism, where it's just free will is just our neurological brain states, which are determined, but they're determined to be able to have certain kinds of functions, and those functions could be called free will. I'm okay with that kind of free will, but it's still just a kind of determinism for the most part.
Okay. How did you discover SE?
Probably talking with Anthony Magnabosco, I think. I think that was probably my first introduction to it, seeing his videos and watching his YouTube videos, meeting him in Texas. I've talked with him a few times. So that's probably how I learned about SE.
Do you think he'd be any good at it if you were motivated to do this?
Probably. I mean, I think it's definitely a useful thing for conversation. And so I definitely use some of the ideas in SE pretty often, like how would that lower your confidence? I've been using that terminology more often because it's better than what would convince you you're wrong, because it's less aggressive. But normally I like to take the more aggressive positions because it has a greater entertainment value. And since the goal is more about the audience than the one you're speaking to, I think that my goals in debates are usually more related to taking the more aggressive position and having more of a debate style kind of controversial conversation rather than simply just exploring beliefs.
And I think you just answered the next question I was going to ask. One or two reasons why SE sucks, and you just gave them. So we're going to skip. Do you think we should have a mandatory to wear mask inside mandate?
Yeah, I think that guess so. There's
And by
in
that I mean
countries
like
like
inside
Sweden,
public spaces as opposed to in my own house. I'm in my own house right now.
juggling
I think
lessons
you
should
are
be
too.
juggling lessons.
You're
Yeah,
not in my
juggling
house,
lessons should
but
be forced to wear a mask. Yeah. So juggling lessons should be forced to wear a mask all the time. We should just like put a giant mask on him, like one of those Hannibal masks, and just be forced to wear it like 24/7. But everyone else can go without one.
Okay,
Exactly.
this is not going to work
Yeah.
with the microphone.
So yeah, I think that there are many countries in the world who are doing really well with their mask restrictions, like the European countries, and they are preventing many deaths from doing that. In America, there are too many people who are cavalier about the restrictions and aren't going to do it. And so in our country, it may be better to just let it go out like kind of like Sweden did, because no
Do you think
one's
Sweden
going to
made the
listen
right
to the
choice?
rules anyway. I
Yeah.
think that if it was America, they would, because no one's in American people aren't going to listen to the laws anyway. And so it's not going to prevent anything to wear masks. And so
So
putting the mask
part
in
of
place
Sweden
is,
was their understanding they were going to get a lot higher cooperation on the basic requirements, the basic limits, so they didn't have to lock down because they have a different culture. Is that part of the calculus?
well, I think the Swedish people would have put the masks on if the laws were in place. So they are more of a generic kind of European country who
Okay.
has the liberal values and who would have listened to it. And so that position in the European countries would have been correct too. But in America, since no one's going to listen to the rules and no one's going to put the mask on, it's not going to really stifle the amount of the contagion. Then in America, it may be better just to let it run its course, kind of like how Sweden did. We're definitely going to see what happens in Sweden based on their choice to just let it run out. And they may actually have a better economic recovery because they're going to have a herd immunity. And so they may recover faster than the other European countries and have less of a damage overall. And I think that's the way America's going to have to go, is we're essentially just going to have to let it run its course, because people are not going to listen to the rules and to stifle the disease to make a significant impact.
I'm quite afraid that that our estimates of how much immunity we get from having had it, that it might be quite possible for people to get it multiple times. It might be
Definitely
that there's
possible,
a slight
but
variation in our, but it's too novel, and so it can have several passes, and that extra scares me. Okay, I think this is a question from Zentz, and let me see if you understand it well. I can understand things being done randomly negating free will, but how is it possible that doing things for reasons negates free will if you're making a choice to do those things based on whatever it is that made you choose to do it?
well, if it made you choose to do it, then it isn't a choice. It's a determined, kind of like just dominoes falling. Like if a domino falls, did the domino choose to fall? Well, no, it was forced to fall by the previous domino. So if your choice is only the fact that you did something because you were determined to do it by the previous things that caused you to think about it, then you didn't really make a choice at all. You were just reacting for the most part. So being determined to do something makes it not a choice. It's you couldn't have done otherwise because the reasons forced you to do that one thing. For it to be a choice, you need to have had the ability to have done otherwise, and the reasons prevent that from occurring. So it's not really a free choice at all.
Okay. Is that a question based on Sweden's choice, implying they have a will and freedom to choose things based on that will? I think that's a follow-up. Yeah, I didn't understand that as a question. Sorry. Bunch of people are typing though. Several. It's even beyond 3. It's several. Apparently. What is the difference between freedom and free will?
Well, freedom is the lack of having any type of external restriction on your nature. So, for example, if someone throws you in jail, you are not free. Even if you had free will, you still wouldn't be free in that case. Free will is the ability, by the libertarian definition that theists use, is the ability to have done otherwise. So if you could just go back in time and make a choice, if you make a choice and then you could go back in time and make the choice again, could you have chosen otherwise? So you have freedom to make a choice if you're not being restricted by external causes to yourself. Like if your brain is making the choice, you have freedom. But you have free will if you could have gone back in time and chosen something differently, independent of the reasons.
It almost sounds like it's defined into unfalsifiability over in a corner in the unobservable and testable zone. It's very difficult for me. And so when I'm talking to people about free will, it's like the libertarian free will of the non. What would non-libertarian free will look like? This is just because I'm confused when people use those terms. What would non-libertarian free will mean? Have you heard
Determinism.
that?
It means determinism that we're going to call Well, it's kind of like one of the big things is that one of the
Okay.
criticisms of many different scientific positions is that they redefine things. Like Lawrence Krauss redefines nothing as just being the quantum vacuum states, and Daniel
Mhm.
Dennett redefines free will as just being the brain states that are determined. So we're essentially just taking new classes of things that we can determine are real and then calling those things using these philosophical terms that have no reference in reality and just using them to apply to things that we can actually prove exist in reality. And I think that's actually a more intellectually correct way to use the terms rather than having them apply to these kind of woo-woo philosophical ideas like free will and the absolute nothingness, which essentially just don't exist.
Is there a normative ethical theory that you prefer, such as deontology, consequentialism, or virtue ethics?
I prefer my moral theory. I think mine is the best. The idea of the
Okay.
best of all possible worlds. It could probably fall into a category of deontology or maybe virtue ethics. I'm not sure. I haven't really tried to make it
Okay.
fit into either of those categories to know, but I definitely prefer mine. The idea of the
All right. So
best of all
D,
possible
other.
worlds.
Got it.
The other.
Your own special one. Yeah. Why is that one objective? Why is, I mean, it's an objective reality in some regards, but you sort of subjectively chose that it's about not violating somebody's consent or not violating somebody's free will. No, but not free will, because that's, and now I'm confused. Please spell it out for me.
Yeah, so we look at the evidence of morality, which is moral intuition and moral progress, and we want to come up with a hypothesis to explain these phenomenon. And my hypothesis is that there is an objective basis of morality, which is the best of all possible worlds. And that's just the principle I use to describe what the similarities are between moral intuition, moral progress, what those veins of evidence would lead to if they could lead to something would point to this kind of a principle. And so in my hypothesis, it is objective because it's an abstract
Mhm.
ideal, kind of like fitness. Like in evolution, fitness is the ability for a species to survive in certain kinds of environments. And if it can survive in more environments, it's more fit or whatever. Now, that's not like a actual thing. You can't like measure fitness on a scale anywhere, but it's definitely a real objective property in the world. And a species that could survive in the most possible environments would be the most fit by the definition because it's a relation between the species and the environment. So morality in an objective sense would just be the same kind of a thing. It would be a measure of the relations between interactions between moral agents or moral agents in the environment or something like that. And so it would just be a measure of an emergent property in the same way that fitness is a measure of the emergent property. And that's how it would be objective. It's just measuring these objective qualities in reality.
Okay. All right. If I go back on my decision saying, you know what, I changed my mind, would it be your free will in your standard?
No, so you would either have to have changed your mind for reasons, in which case it would be determined by those reasons, or you
Okay.
would have had to have changed your mind for no reason, in which case it would have just been random. Either of those would be free will because you couldn't have done otherwise.
Okay. Gauss Prime asks, has T-Jump seen a good movie lately? Possibly with SE. Good movie with SE stuff? Okay, I'm not sure if that's, I don't know if that's that makes part of the sense of the question, but have you seen a good movie lately?
I don't usually watch movies ever, so not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does Tom see his argument for an objective reality as similar to Sam Harris's argument? And if
Objective
you want an
reality,
explanation,
reality or
yeah, if you want an
morality?
explanation, Reed will explain.
Did,
Morality.
for Sam Harris's reality or Sam Harris's morality?
Morality.
Yeah, so I definitely see similarities in some way, but I don't go based off of well-being, whereas he goes based off of well-being. Like he uses the example of if some guy wanted to like vomit until he dies or something, then it would be moral to stop him for his well-being. Whereas I take the opposite position. I think it would be immoral to force him to stop if he chose to do this fully knowingly.
Yeah.
So I think his choices supersedes his well-being.
The similarity I see is like he's going from the worst of all possible worlds is like a world where every conscious creature that can suffers to the maximum degree for as long as possible. That's like the worst possible world, and anything that moves us away from that is good. With your argument, it's like you go the opposite end and you start with like the best possible world, and anything that moves away from that is bad. That's how I see the similarity.
Well, yeah, absolutely. There's definitely that similarity, which is true of all objective models of morality, because they're all defining that there's going to be a best or worst of all possible worlds based on however they define whatever morality is. So yeah, there's definitely a similarity between the objective model, that they're saying there is some kind of a criterion that if it was maximalized, it would lead to the best or most moral possible world. Definitely.
I like them both.
Thank you.
What? Sorry. What would he said? No. What would he say? Would what he said be morality based on scientific naturalism?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm cold reading these. I'm not doing it well.
I think you did, because it does say what would he said be morality based on scientific naturalism. So
okay, yes, I got stumbled. That's fine.
But yeah, it's moral naturalism is the position in philosophy where you can know morality through scientific means and investigate them just like any other natural means. So yes, that would be a morality based on scientific naturalism. All the different versions of moral naturalism are scientific naturalism versions of morality. Like Cornell realism, I think, is the one I is closest to my model. But yeah, you could just check the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy for moral naturalism if you want a more detailed definition.
Okay, thank you. Why does having reasons make free will impossible? Just because it's either determined or random, why does that negate libertarian free will?
So libertarian free will is defined as the ability to have done otherwise. So if you make a decision, I'm going to choose chocolate ice cream rather than vanilla, you could go back in time and then make a different decision. Now, if you have reasons for choosing chocolate, like for example, I like chocolate better than vanilla, and you go back in time and you always choose chocolate and you never could have chosen vanilla, then you don't have the ability to have done otherwise. So there's no free will there. Your choice was determined by the reasons. So again, free will is the ability to have done otherwise. And if reasons prevent you from being able to have done otherwise, then you don't have free will.
Okay. So where do you stand on hard determinism?
I'm
is that
definitely
something that you
Yeah, so I'm definitely in the physics camp of hard determinism, as in things determined by physical processes or just randomness. But there is definitely no libertarian free will. So if you want to take the idea that there is some kind of fundamental randomness to the universe and say, well, that's not determinism in the physics sense, that's totally fine. I can agree with that. But there's definitely no libertarian free will where there's something outside of determined or random processes.
yes, you may speak. Absolutely. Go ahead, Nir.
Hey, so I just had one more question about like your model for objective morality. Like so you and Reed were talking about like if the guy's throwing up, until he dies, it would be under your model immoral to stop him because you're like limiting his freedom or restricting his freedom.
Yeah, pretty much. So in my model, an immoral action is an involuntary imposition of will. So if he wants to, if it's in his nature and he's perfectly rational and he chooses to want to vomit to death for whatever reason, like maybe he's a scientist and he just wants to see what will happen, then it's immoral to force him to stop because you don't want him to do it. If he is choosing voluntarily to do this and he's not like under some kind of delusion or not in fully cognitive state, then yeah, it's moral for him to be able to choose to do that, and it's immoral for you to force him to stop.
Okay, and then I think so back to the apples thing. Like, so what I'm curious about is if a household limited their selection of foods to purely apples, and say they never let their kids even look at junk food, let alone taste it, would you see that as like an imposition on their freedom?
Yes, probably. So again, so in my model, it's defined as you have to get rid of all the pragmatic limitations. Like if you only have apples, then you're forced to eat apples because nature forces you to eat apples. You just don't have another option. So that, in that sense, it would be immoral because you're being limited by nature. So the moral thing to do would essentially just put everyone in essentially kind of like the Matrix, where they can just snap their fingers and make whatever food they want whenever they want. That would be the highest level of morality possible. And so, but because in our world there are many pragmatic limitations, like we don't have infinite resources and can't just snap our fingers to generate things, we have to do the best we can within our limitations to try and accommodate our needs within the restrictions of physics and nature. And so if someone only provides apples because they think that's the best way to promote survivability, and if they provide like junk food, then it could lead to health issues or whatever, then yeah, that is still technically immoral because it's not the best of all possible worlds, but it's the best they can do given their limitations in this world.
Okay, so I think I'm starting to understand. Like, would it be something like the most moral thing that we can do in our practical, I guess, reality would be to like give as many resources to people as possible and grant like as many freedoms as we can to everybody?
Yeah, exactly. We just give everyone as much freedom as we can given the limitation of our resources, and then as we gain more resources, we can give them more freedom.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
I'm going to try to paraphrase from Zentz. The first question: how does your what do you think about the time it takes for neurons to fire, and the sort of prediction that neuroscientists can do about our choices? Do you think that affects your notion of free will? Does that affect your thinking about determinism or free will?
Well, since I agree with determinism, I also agree with the studies in neurology that they can look at an fMRI and know the actions we're going to choose before we choose them ourselves. So it would agree with my position that the studies in neurology show that there is no such thing as free will. Choice is an illusion that we have after the fact, or some part of our subconscious mind made the choice before we're even aware of it, and then it tells us that we've made the choice after the fact. So I totally agree with the studies in neurology, and they would comport with the idea of determinism. I think the vast majority of neurologists would agree that our brains and minds are all just physical, and it's all determined by other things, and there isn't any kind of free will or independent process out there that can get us out of that.
Okay. Which religion or does a religion exist that is approaching your objective morals?
Yes, Jainism and certain versions of Buddhism and Hinduism are extremely close. Like, for example, one of the qualities or one of the evidences of objective morality is moral progress. We can see that as society gets more resources, it does give more freedoms to disenfranchised groups like LGBT communities, people who are poor, people who are old, people who can't help themselves, people who are mentally handicapped. As societies gain more resources, we see it as obligatory to help those people when we have the resources to do so. Whereas in the past, we didn't do that. We didn't try to support them because any extra resources could put the society at risk. So we can see this being reflected in religious beliefs. For example, the Catholic Church has recently said that homosexuality isn't a mortal sin. It won't make you go to hell anymore, and that you can actually go to heaven if you're an atheist, because they are adopting the more moral progress of society. They're adopting the fact that we do see value in people who are disenfranchised because we have these excess resources is being translated into religious beliefs that used to be more stringent. And we can see that some religions are better in this sense because of the fact that they don't need as much uh, change in the moral progress. For example, Jainism, Buddhism, and Hinduism, in those more extreme pacifistic senses, have not had essentially any changes to accommodate the moral progress because they've always been at the extreme nonviolent route of seeing value in all life. And so those religions would be the closest to what I would define as objective morality, because they cohere with this idea of the best of all possible worlds where all conscious things are valued, and as opposed to other religions like Christianity or Islam, who denigrate certain groups, and they have had to change to accommodate moral progress and see value in people which otherwise would not have seen value. They would not have seen value in previously.
Okay. Are there any further questions from the audience? You're welcome to just unmute and talk. If someone had two conflicting reasons in his mind, example, I love ice cream, but I must lose weight, would choosing the first reason instead of the second be free will?
For them to choose the second reason, they must have a different reason, in which case it's determined by that different reason, or they must have no additional reasons, like if this is exactly a 50-50 split between ice cream and losing weight. Then if they manage to choose one of those reasons, it's going to be random. So there's nothing determining them. It's just completely random. It's like flipping a coin, in which case it's not a choice at all. Or, like I said, it's determined by some other choice, which does make it more lean towards one way or the other, which means you couldn't have done otherwise. So again, there is no possibility of free will there. It's always going to be either it's determined by some prior reason, which makes it lean one way more than the other, in which case you couldn't have done otherwise, or it's going to be completely random, in which case you couldn't have done otherwise because it's not a choice that you made.
What is your favorite color?
Probably go with green or black. Colors of my
Thank you.
logo, pretty much.
Yeah, those are good colors. Okay. Are there any other questions from the audience? I have lots of comments from Flash. Free will doesn't exist. Casteism. Lots of amazing. He's been calling you all this stuff, just listing off the philosophical terms for each of these positions. It's been fun. Hard incompatibilism for the win. Thank you, Flash. Okay. Some Janes used cheesecloth to filter what they drink just to make sure they don't accidentally kill a bug and watch every step they take, again, to make sure they commit zero violence against any living thing. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that was what I mentioned earlier. The Jains are one of the religions that come close to my definition of objective morality because they do see value in all conscious things, including flies, fruit flies, and spiders, and everything that's alive. And so that would definitely be the height of objective morality, where you see value in all living things, and all living things, you should not impose any involuntary impositions on them, even if they're insects. They also have moral value, and killing them is also morally wrong, just like it would be to kill a human.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions? We are coming up on an hour. In the meantime, I'd like to plug your channel. I got your channel up on the screen. Would you like to describe for us why, if we're not already fans of you and subscribed, why we should be?
I do good fun stuff. Yeah, let's go with that. I don't know. Like I do
Okay.
debates. If you like debates and like interesting conversations and thinking about complex stuff, that's what I usually do on my channel. And then there's also screaming matches and dumpster fires. If you like those, you can just look for the dumpster fire tag, and got some of those.
Special tag, dumpster fire. Appreciate those.
Yeah.
Those are probably the ones I miss, and I try really hard to catch up. You know, since starting a YouTube channel, I have this big problem in that I only get to consume about maybe a tenth to a fifth of the that I used to be able to. I could barely keep up with you and Pine Creek and like 8 or 10 other favorites that I have. Okay. Cool. Thanks again. I don't agree, but Jainism, I would probably have to be the closest thing to a religion that could be considered objectively moral. So you just have agreement from the audience as well. Thank you very much, Tom, for coming and gracing my show. I'll try not to fangirl too hard here, but that's just this is a big deal for me personally.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the invite. I'm talking with you guys.
Thank you. Here are, turn that one off. Here are 5 of my channels that are specifically about SE. Unfortunately, my Tom's is not on there because he is not SE. So he's SE adjacent. If you are really into this concept of SE, into the method of street epistemology, one of my favorite places for resources is here on the streetepistemology.com server, provided by Street Epistemology International. Good people over there. Thank you for coming to this discussion about SE. If you would like to be a guest on my show, if you're willing to be polite, articulate, show your face, talk to me on any subject, topic of SE, I can fit you in probably one of my categories, and I look forward to hearing from you.